Well, the transfer portal is closed. Spring football is now over, and we've got our post-spring power rankings from Dennis Dodd at CBSSports.com. Alabama is number one. They are stacked. They've got the reigning Heisman winner Bryce Young returning, maybe the best overall player in the country, Will Anderson on defense. Nick Saban and the Tide coming off that national championship game loss to Georgia. The Bulldogs number 3 in Dennis's rankings, though they have better odds to win it all than Ohio State, who's sandwiched in between those two SEC schools. The Buckeyes 2, Oklahoma is 4, but as you can see by the odds, there's a big drop-off from those top 3 to the rest of college football. So that 4th playoff team could be completely up for grabs this season. Let's bring in Dennis Dodd, who's out in Scottsdale for the spring meetings. A lot of college football commissioners are out there trying to get their ducks in a row this season. Look, Dennis, 2 out of the last 5 national championship games have come down to Alabama and Georgia, even though they're in the same conference. How do they compare going into this upcoming season?
Very favorably. Look, Alabama, I think, is going to be the preseason number 1. No surprise there. Only in that, Chris, in 2020, that was supposed to be a rebuilding year, and I put that in quotes, obviously, because it's Alabama. But remember, in 2019, they had, 6 players leave and go in the first round of the draft. So in a rebuilding year, in 2021, I should say, they go to the national championship game. But at Alabama, they were shooting for this year. They were shooting for 2022, and everything was going to come together. So they should be number 1. You mentioned Will Anderson Jr. He may be the number 1 pick in the draft at this time next year. Maybe a Heisman candidate. Bryce Young, he may win it, and he's certainly a Heisman candidate as a quarterback. Got a little rebuilding on the offensive line. But in terms of those 6 number 1 draft choices or first-round draft choices, they think they may have as many as 9 next year. That's already the speculation around this team at Alabama. And Georgia, frankly, just has enough talent left. They're going to make this season about running it back, but they have enough talent left from a generational defense, which I talked to Dan Lanning the other day here, the new Oregon coach who coordinated that defense. He takes credit for 6 first-rounders off that Georgia defense. It was reported to be 5, but he reminded me that Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end from Florida State, transferred from Georgia. So he was under his sway. He takes credit for that. So 15 overall at Georgia, but they've got plenty of talent left. Maybe not generational on the defensive side of the ball, but you mentioned it in those odds. The odds makers can only come up with 3 sure things. It drops off after that. Georgia's got enough left. They should have enough talent there to make a run at it. And again, 2 teams from the SEC.
And they begin with Oregon. They do not play Alabama in the regular season, though we will expect them to meet up in the SEC championship game again. So let's talk about how you came to that number 4 ranking for Oklahoma. Why did the Sooners, despite losing their coach, their quarterback, why are they your 4th team?
Yeah, it was an inner debate. At one point I had Baylor on there. Now they just lost their starting quarterback, who actually lost the job, Jerry Bohannon, out of the spring, so he's going to end up transferring somewhere. I really believe in Dave Aranda. I think he's one of the smartest, most, one of the deepest thinkers in college football. And it's one of those programs where you don't know the talent right away, but they're going to play tough. I remember a game last year against Oklahoma where they were up by 10 and kicked a field goal with 3 seconds left. And I asked Dave Aranda why, and he said he had figured out the tiebreaker in the Big 12, that it may come down to point differential, and that's why he did it. He's a blooming coach. He's going to be one of the best for years. But I came down to Oklahoma basically because of pedigree. Yes, you're betting on a first-year head coach, and Brent Venables, but he's one that has 2 national championship rings. He's surrounded by greatness on that staff. Ted Roof is a veteran coordinator on defense, has been in about every Power 5 conference there is. And Jeff Lebby on offense, who's a disciple, for better or worse, of Art Briles. Well, let's just put it a disciple of the air raid, so not much changes there. They're very deep at running back. Eric Gray, the Tennessee transfer, is still there. And Dylan Gabriel, who's a proven 3,500, 4,000-yard passer at UCF. I don't think much will change on defense. I'm just thinking that they've got to get better, Oklahoma, defensively on average. They never were great in the last few years, under Mike Stoops and then under Alex Grinch. Alex Grinch, improved things a little bit. I think with Brent Venables there, this is going to be a stark difference in defense. And in the Big 12, that means a lot. Where if you go 11-1 and 12-1, you can be in the playoff hunt. So that plus the fact, Chris, I can't come up with anybody else. Notre Dame's not going to be there. Miami's not going to be there. Some of these other teams, Clemson sure as heck isn't going to be there based on last year. So I just came up with Oklahoma at number 4.
Well, you know, some people are going to be picking Lincoln Riley and USC to be there, but I mean, it's year one, and they had a long way to go. He's making huge strides. They're making noise in the transfer portal. You've got them 14th in your preseason rankings. What do they have at this point?
One of the biggest, in a short period, one of the most significant, biggest roster turnovers in recent memory, and I think that's probably what Lincoln Riley, not that he had to sell the USC administration on that, but when he laid out his plan, he said, given the portal, given NIL and everything else at our disposal, Southern California, the weather, me as coach, Lincoln Riley, he can get things turned around. And you have the situation now with, Jordan Addison, the receiver from Pittsburgh, who we're just kind of sitting in midair. Is he going to go to USC or not? And what are the circumstances surrounding that? That would give them the Biletnikoff Award winner from Pittsburgh as a transfer, possibly, depending on who you like, the best receiver in the country, going in with a proven quarterback, Caleb Williams. What I think has to happen, and to answer your question, Chris, I think it's too much to ask USC for anybody to go from 4-8 to playoff contender, or maybe even win the Pac-12. That's a mighty lift because they have issues on the offensive line, they have issues on the defensive line, and frankly, they have issues with toughness. They had gotten away under Clay Helton from the student body mentality, even under Pete Carroll. As many weapons as they had, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, they were tough. They beat you up at the end of the day. The USC teams lately haven't. And how does that play in with a new head coach who's a air raid guy, but has to get it done defensively, I think, if USC takes the next step.
Talking about Dennis Dodd, he's got his post-spring power rankings up on. And Texas A&M is once again in the top 10. They are number 7 after notching the number 1 ranked recruiting class, not just in the class of 22, but in college football history since we've been doing recruiting rankings. How much of an impact are those true freshmen going to make this season?
Well, I think that's the question. If you believe in Texas A&M, you're kind of believing in something that's never happened. This monster recruiting class is going to help right away. I mean, this isn't basketball where you can get 1 or 2 5-stars and go to the Final Four. Football is a different animal, and frankly, I've never seen it. So yes, great recruiting class, best ever according to the experts. 8 5-stars, that's never happened before. But my question is, how many of those guys are going to contribute meaningfully right away to contribute to the bottom line? This team beat Alabama, but was 8-4 last year. They still need to find a quarterback. Now that may be Haynes King, who's already on the roster. Connor Wigman, one of those 5-stars who's coming in but hasn't played college football, maybe in there. One of the guys that could impact right away is a defensive lineman named Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. He's supposed to be a guy that is supposed to be a difference maker. But look, when the competition within your own division is Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU rebuilding, it's going to be tough for Texas A&M to compete for a playoff spot. And let's just start with winning the division, which is something Jimbo Fisher hasn't done yet, going into year 5 since he signed that 10-year deal, which has now been renegotiated. But year 5 at Texas A&M, will people get restless if they don't come through and contend this year, even with that monster recruiting class?
All right, so A&M is 7. Over in Austin, the Texas Longhorns are in your top 25. They're number 17. They did not have a single player drafted off last year's 5-win team, but they've got Quinn Ewers in there trying to win the starting quarterback job. Why do you think that they are a top 20 team right now?
They have the perfect look for the Big 12. They're very good offensively. They might be the best offense in the Big 12. That'll get you a long way in the Big 12. That'll get you to 8-4. That might even get you to a New Year's Six Bowl, being your brand is Texas. But when you have Quinn Ewers, you have Bijan Robinson, and you have Xavier Worthy, who I picked in one projection to be the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, the great receiver, you've got triplets, and they're going to be very good offensively. They had to fix the offensive line, and that goes back to the discussion about NIL and collectives. They weren't a very good offensive line last year. I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but there was a collective started just for offensive linemen. They're basically being paid $50,000 each, the slappies as well as the starters, for being Texas offensive linemen. Now they have to do tweets or whatever they have to do, but they've lured a class of offensive linemen that they think can help. I don't know about the defense. This was a team that went 5-7 last year. It lost to Kansas in a shootout that went into the 50s in overtime. I don't know if you can get that fixed in 1 year. So this looks like a team that can win 8 games just with their offense that they have. I don't think it's going to be a breakthrough season, but it's going to get what is a warming hot seat, really, off of Steve Sarkisian.
Oh, well, your dome is a warming hot seat out there in Scottsdale. It looks like a beautiful day. You got the flowers and the cacti behind you out there at the spring meetings where college football commissioners are chopping it up. Good stuff out there, Dennis. Looking forward to talking more about the upcoming season with you, and we'll discuss more on the Cover 3 podcast as well. All things college football. Spring season is over. We transition into summer. Before you know it, it will be time for fall camp in August.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.